15 minutes, 11 cases to go, just like always. All right, what are we going to do with this one?
We can take the next one. So we can see from low power this increased population of cells. We can go a little bit more high power, and then we'll start seeing this like irregularly branching vascular architecture.
Yeah.
And then looking at the actual cells that are lining the endothelial cells, they're a lot more pleomorphic, hyperchromatic. There's some multi-layering.
Yep.
It's very malignant looking. There's also some crack-like spaces as well.
Yeah, so
this one's good for angiosarc.
Very good. Angiosarcoma. There are a lot of different patterns in angiosarcoma, but some of the classic things are interconnected, infiltrative, anastomosing channels, or that is kind of the buzzword, and that's exactly what we're seeing here. All these channels, you could like kind of, if this was a lake and you had a boat, you could kind of go from this channel down here. You could like go almost all the way across the slide without hitting too many roadblocks, right? Now, there are other things that can do that. And remember the case of a Masson tumor, papillary endothelial hyperplasia, a lot like this pattern, right? But without the pleomorphism. And the difference here, that was inside a pre-existing vascular channel, which is reassuring. This is actually in the dermis, infiltrating between reticular dermal collagen bundles. That's bad. You don't get, that's why it's really important to try to recognize that background vascular channel in papillary endothelial hyperplasia. And because angiosarcomas, surprisingly, almost never grow inside the lumen of a vessel. The main exception being by the great vessels, like the pulmonary artery, the inferior vena, or the vena cava aorta. You can have something called intimal sarcoma. that can actually have angiosarcomatous differentiation sometimes. But aside from that, or cases of Dacron vascular graft-associated angiosarc, the vast majority of angiosarcs start in the dermis like this, and then infiltrate everywhere else, but they don't usually start in the lumen of a vessel, okay? So that's important, kind of counterintuitive. But, and then like you said, usually you're going to have really severe, nasty, pleomorphic, hyperchromatic, ugly nuclei, often multi-layering, or the vessel lumens will start filling up with multiple endothelial cells. We're starting to see that here. My colleague, Jackie Junkins-Hopkins, was the one who introduced me to this term, but fish in the creek. Sometimes they'll be like the vascular channels like the creek, and then all the endothelial cells kind of swimming along in the creek are filling it up like fish, So, but not good fish, like piranhas, okay, bad. And often angiosarc has a lot of background inflammation around it, okay, and that's what we're seeing here. There's often hemorrhage, there's often hemosiderin, and the classic place that I see these most often is on the head and neck of sun-damaged older adults, scalp or face of older adults, and even compared to other sun-damaged sites, by far it is more common in the head and neck, not other sites. Even like the dorsal arm and dorsal hand get tons of sun damage, but I almost never see angiosarcoma there. Why? I don't know. Something different about the vessels in the head and neck. I don't understand why that is. The other place we see it is in radiated skin, particularly on the breast. So anything that looks like a non-healing bruise that's changing, or after a breast radiation, you need to biopsy that right away and follow those patients until you find an answer. There are other things that can happen that are benign and reactive that can mimic angiosarc clinically in the breast, but that needs a biopsy and close follow-up, like hypervigilance in that setting, okay? And it comes back benign. Keep watching until it gets better. If it doesn't get better, biopsy it again. All right. The same thing is true for a bruise on the face of a sun-damaged patient that doesn't get better. You should biopsy that. All right. This is a scary example here where it kind of looks like telangiectasia, right? But too many telangiectasia and too much atypia. So I've seen that on a small shave where it looked like telangiectasia, but a little too much packed together and too much atypia, and then they did a deeper biopsy and boom, angiosarc. But look how sneaky it can be, right? Sneaky channels hiding in the background inflammation. Angiosarcoma is very scary, and look how infiltrative. It keeps going and going and going. And so because of it, it's really hard to manage. These are very aggressive. They have a high mortality. I've met quite a few patients who've been cured of this, but I've also met patients that have not done well. So I volunteered in an angiosarcoma support group on Facebook. So this is a disease that I both am fascinated by and hate with the fire of 1,000 suns because of the horrible damage it does to people's lives. Yeah, very scary. I've got tons of videos on angiosarc. This is a big excision, but you can see it still probably goes to the margin here. Probably sneaking out. I don't know if this is a real margin or not in this case, but angiosarcoma. And the ones in radiated sites or chronic lymphedema sites often have c-MYC amplification as a little board pearl for study purposes.